Hello and welcome to Cultivators Conversations. It's a video series brought to you by the Cultivators community, hosted by Cultivate, where we're going to chat about a variety of topics that interest cultivators, change makers, culture champions, community builders, generally people who challenge the status quo at their workplace. I'm Jeff Montague. I'm the host of Cultivators Conversations and the community manager for the Cultivators community. Joining me today is Bethany Goldson from SnapStream. Welcome, Bethany. Thanks for joining us. And really quickly, share a little bit about what you do for SnapStream, obviously within the context of this conversation.
Yeah, so I currently own the hiring process as well as culture and people strategy. So, I do all things surrounding people. So it's been great. I've kind of come into my role when the pandemic started and, have just very quickly started to work on all of these different processes and realized how much I love it. And it's been interesting too, diving into owning a hiring process in a remote environment. Because that's something I never expected to do, but something I've ended up loving. So.
Right. So, like, when you interviewed for this job, was it pre-pandemic and you did an in-person interview, or was it a virtual interview?
Yeah, so I'm going to be with SnapStream coming up on 3 years in July. And so when I started, I applied to be an office assistant and I had in-person interviews.
Okay.
So yeah, it was back-to-back interviews in the office, and the SnapStream office was really cool. I remember the conference room that we interviewed in had like a beer wall in the corner.
Oh.
And I was like, this is my place.
I love it. But well, now at home, when you work from home, you have a whole beer wall too, if you want, I guess, right?
Oh, I know. I should have brought mine out for this.
That's right. You see, yeah, this is Conversations After Dark.
Right.
So, all right. So, yeah, in case for those of you watching, if you haven't read the title, this episode is about interviewing for jobs in a virtual setting. Because I do think even post-pandemic, we're probably going to see. Oop, I hit my microphone. We're probably going to see a little bit of a hybrid situation where I think more people will still interview on camera through Zoom or something like that. In addition, and maybe like sometimes they interview in person, sometimes not. But instead of it being a conversation about and people who have interviewed for jobs, we're talking to you because we want your perspective as the person who conducts the interview and maybe give a little bit of an insight to people who will be interviewing so that they can maybe think of certain things because, whenever you're doing an interview. So one of the questions I had right out of the gate is, do you have any stories worth sharing about certain interviews? We protect the name, keep the names out of it and whatnot. Are there any kind of, I wouldn't say horror stories, but maybe cautionary tales or something maybe something somebody did or something happened during an interview that they might have felt bad about, but you as the interviewer might be a little more forgiving, because you understand, right? Because I think a lot of people put a lot of pressure, like it has to be perfect on my end.
Right. Yeah. I think people often, go into an interview thinking that they have to show up as perfect. But, as the interviewer, we're not looking for somebody who is perfect. We're looking for a new perspective to add to our team that can build out our team. And of course, our values, we have 5 different values, but of course, pertaining to being an owner and being curious, we're looking for diversity in thought and in perspective. So I did have one person that I was interviewing, and this was a little thing, but I could kind of tell she was a little breathless, when we were talking. And typically I'll start by, hey, what's your story? Why'd you apply for this job? How did you end up in this field? That kind of stuff. And she was quite nervous, and I could tell. And whenever I get a nervous candidate, I don't hold that against them because it's weird to be talking on the phone and, try to get as much information about yourself in 30 minutes. But she kind of kept talking. I was talking faster and faster, and I was sitting there like trying to type and get it all in. And then eventually she just kind of like let out a big sigh. I was like, I'm sorry. I am so nervous. And that actually
good.
kind of, yeah, it was great because it broke the ice. And I was able to be like, it's okay. Take a breath. I'm on your team. I want to get to know you. And even if this isn't a perfect position for you, we're always looking for people to add to our talent pool. And maybe I can reach out for, another position in the future.
Yeah.
So, and you know what? I'm nervous too.
Right. I don't want you to get the wrong impression. Right, because a lot of times the interviewer is also interviewing the company. Right? Do I want to work here? Uh,
Yeah.
but I think to me, if somebody's nervous, to me it says they care. Right?
Yes.
It means that it's important to them, which I think is a good sign as well. And everybody's nervous on that first one. That doesn't necessarily mean that, right? You understand that she's not going to be nervous for her entire time while she works here. Right?
Yes.
Hopefully.
You
Right?
know, it's a weird situation. And especially with the phone screen, sometimes you're not even seeing the other person that you're talking to. Most of my screens are, just phone.
Mm-hmm.
And rarely do I do a video for that stage. But we were able to just kind of take a pause and, talk about it a little bit more. And then for the rest of the interview, she was very relaxed, and I was able to pick up on, some little personal tidbits that she was comfortable, talking about after that, and was able to kind of create conversation from that to make her more comfortable, and really have a conversation instead of just an interview. So
Right.
overall, it was a great experience.
So when you interview, do you give the people an option, or do you do a lot of virtual like this kind of interviews, or are most of them phone?
So from my stage, I typically do the first interview and first point of contact, and I will do a phone screen. So I will just call them on the phone. And I also like that because I think it's just another tool in reducing bias. We
Mm-hmm.
don't have pictures on our applications, and it makes me focus on, what they're saying. So that way I can just
Yeah.
interpret the information and really focus on creating conversation where possible.
Yeah, yeah. I remember interviewing for a job a while back, and the interviewers even said ahead of the interview, saying like, "Look, we're going to do it on Zoom or Google Meet or something like that." But he said, "But you don't have to turn on your camera if you don't want to." And
Hmm.
then in the interview, he explained, I did anyway, because I'm fine with the camera. But he did explain, he said, the reason I told you that was because I didn't want to introduce any unconscious bias. And I never really thought of that, but you're right. I mean, it's one thing. And he said, like, there was an interview one time where the person interviewing was in their bedroom and behind them was a treadmill with the clothes hanging off of it. And you're trying not to look at that and make a decision or a judgment because of that. So I thought it was really interesting that a lot of people feel like if it is going to be a Zoom or a Google Meet type interview that they have to turn the camera on. I appreciated as the interviewee that that the interviewer said you don't have to turn your camera if you don't want to, and I thought that was nice.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that's awesome. But typically after me, we switch to video interviews because there's actually quite a bit of body language that you can
Absolutely,
pick up even just through video. So the first point of contact, phone.
yeah, but that's good because it's like a ramp up, right? It's a warm up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and then, so let's say post pandemic, do you see SnapStream sticking with a more virtual interview, like the whole process being virtual, or would you start bringing people in for personal interviews at some point?
I think it would depend. Because currently I relocated outside of Houston where the majority of SnapStream is, most of our workforce is. And we have decided that pretty much all positions, unless there's a reason that they need to be specific to Houston, we're hiring nationwide.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for those nationwide candidates, we most likely will have the majority of the interview through video. And of course, with me, not being in Houston, I think the majority of the time it would be through video. But
Yeah.
depending on the position, we might be able to do a mishmash and kind of have a hybrid interview environment as well as,
Yeah.
hybrid work
Maybe
environment.
depending on like where the position sits. Like you said, if it's a virtual remote position, then a remote interview makes sense because this is what the actual work dynamic is going to be. The relationship with the person is going to be. A lot of people might come into an interview, they have the job description, if they're prepared, right? They have the job description and they're prepared to talk about that. But then there's also that going into an interview where you wonder, am I going to be asked questions about the job and how I would do it? Or am I going to get those standard interview questions, which is like, describe a time in the past when you had to, face adversity or do this kind of thing. So, what's your style and what do you find gives you the best information about the candidate?
Yeah, so we've put a lot of thought into how to integrate our values into the hiring process. And so far, I think that we've been very successful. And what it's kind of come to is I recognize that the hiring manager is the expert in what they need for this position.
Ah,
And so we've organized it to where I do hear a candidate's story. I don't want to hear you read out your resume. but I want to hear, what inspires you, what drove you to come into this field, and what are you looking for in a new position?
So that's you in the pre-screen, right? You're looking more for the personality, how they'd fit into the company, and then let the second interview with the hiring manager maybe go into the. I guess you're still pre-qualifying. I mean, that's not to say.
Yeah. And so what I do now is I actually send an email because I recognize that a lot of people are coming into the interview not knowing what to expect. They would kind of default to reading out their resume. So I've kind of adjusted my email that's first point of contact, and I will tell them, so, in this first interview, we focus on the values. My questions are focused on our values. And here's our About Us page. Go over here and take a read for a
Mm-hmm.
second, if you can. And when I ask the candidate if they have any questions at the end, I tell them, I'm your people and culture person. I can give you, overview answers, but questions that, are highly specific to the position, I like to save that for the hiring manager.
Yeah.
And also I tell them who the hiring manager is. So if they want to reach out with a question or something like that, they can.
Or they
But
want to
that's
LinkedIn
usually the next step.
search them.
Yeah, but I've worked together, and I
Yeah.
show the questions with the hiring managers before I do any phone screens to show them, these are the
Yeah.
questions that we ask, and I have an arsenal of questions that pertain to each different value. So that way hiring managers are able to add in, a technical question there if they want. But most
Yeah.
hiring managers see the value in talking about those values beforehand. So
In the video interviews that you've been a part of, what are people wearing nowadays? Because again, you think in-person interview as a guy, I would show up wearing a suit, right? Jacket, tie, button down, classic, whatever. But I feel like in a camera interview, that might be overdressed.
yeah, it's actually pretty interesting. And to be honest, I haven't really thought about this. Here at SnapStream, we're really casual. And I am very open with telling people when I'm wearing yoga pants and still in my pajamas because, I think that's a great benefit of working from home. I have seen a couple blazers, but none of them have been like formal, black
Right. Three
blazers, because
piece.
that's
Right.
also, yeah, at SnapStream, like I don't think I've seen anybody internally wear, a blazer, maybe once. So typically I see candidates kind of like wearing bright colors, going for something like that. But a lot of the times I'll see like, pretty casual wear, like what you're wearing,
Mm-hmm.
a nice polo, right? Or just a solid color shirt. That's most of what I see. But there's even one candidate when I was talking to them, we were talking about working from home, and I was like, yeah, I just got to say, I love that I'm doing this phone interview from bed right now.
Yeah, yeah. That's what makes you comfortable, and
Right. And I think that also as a candidate, when you're kind of exploring the company that you applied for, you can also kind of get the vibe of, what
yeah,
their expectations might be around that. So looking at company pictures of maybe some fun stuff they have done together, if they have that, look at their social media pages. When you see pictures of people in the office when they were, if they ever were, how are people dressing in the pictures? And that can kind of be a guide to kind of inform you of what,
that's
if
a
you might have expectations.
really good idea there too. Because you're right. I mean, you might be applying for a job at a company where the suit is important.
It's really about the content of what they're saying.
Yeah.
And, from my perspective, when hiring here at SnapStream, that's what I'm thinking about. So
Right.
if they come in a blazer, but, they're telling their stories, they're a good storyteller, they're open about their experiences, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And you don't have to lay out your whole life story. I'm not looking for that. But,
But if they
you
do, no.
know,
But
somebody who's in a growth mindset, who has had experiences and isn't afraid to admit where it didn't go the way that they wanted it to, and is able to talk about what they learned from that,
yeah,
because that's a big key point in having that growth mindset. And that's something that's pretty important to us here too. There's a lot of talk about emotional intelligence in, the office, which I love. I'm so glad that that is becoming a topic. And I know that that's a conversation that you've had here at
hmm,
Cultivators before too, right? But emotional intelligence is a skill. And so really the attitude boils down to, is that a skill
yeah,
that they can build more on? Because there's nobody who's perfect at emotional intelligence.
right.
That is an ever evolving skill. So is that something that you are open to? Are you open to receiving and giving feedback, and, open to having those open, honest conversations?
Right. Absolutely. All right, well, that is our time for today. Bethany, thank you for joining us. I know we have a couple other ideas for conversations that we'll have you on for future episodes. I'm going to thank all of our viewers for watching and listening. You know, sometimes you can just press play and pull up another screen. That's okay, too. To the Cultivators Conversations. If you've missed any of our previous episodes, the good news is that you don't have to watch them in order. They're not sequential. And so if you are a change maker with a desire to change the status quo where you work, or in your life, join the Cultivators community by going to cultivateall.com/cultivators.